Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Harney. On behalf of the Board of Directors and as President from District 5, I'm calling to order the 2020 annual meeting of the Southeast Colorado Power Association. I'd like to begin by asking Lawrence Brozzi, our Secretary-Treasurer from District 2, to please offer an invocation. If you would please stand with us.
Our most graciously Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity that we can meet together as a co-op and talk about our year that we have had and answer questions and anything that the members would like, that know that we are doing our best that we can for the membership of Southeast Colorado Co-op. So we thank you for everything that you've done for us, Lord. We ask that you continue to bring moisture to the community, as some areas have had some and some areas haven't, but we ask that you bless us with more moisture. We ask that you guide us and direct us through this time of change that we don't quite understand fully the depth of it, probably, that the COVID-19 virus that is taking the world, and we are concerned about that, and we ask that you continue to guide and direct us through that. We ask that you be with our armed services as they are fighting and defending our freedoms that we so much enjoy. Thank you for the fine employees and we have here at Southeast Colorado Power, that they continue to serve our members as they are the #1 project that they have going. All this we ask in God's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Lawrence. If you wouldn't remain standing, please. As our tradition to honor our country during a time of national unity, would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Like riding a bike. Yeah, it is.
Allow me to introduce the other board of directors and staff present today in the boardroom. First, we have Bill Graspick, Vice President, District 6. Truman Wright, District 1. Brad Buck, District 3. Randy Phillips, District 4. Clint Anderson, District 7. Let's go right over here. Yeah, trying to keep track of everybody. Next on staff, we have Jack Johnson, our CEO. Cortland Pratt, our Chief Legal Officer. Debbie Howard, Executive Assistant and Recording Secretary. Kevin Brandon, Chief Member Services and Technology Service. And Bill Malkowitz, Chief Financial Officer. He's in the other room.
We're getting ready to go.
Okay. Like so many other professional organizations, we've had to adapt to the current social climate given government restrictions on the maximum size of gatherings. After much discussion, it was decided that this modified format was the best option for our annual meeting. So for those viewing virtually, we regret this is only a one-way video stream. Based on past year's attendance and licensing, we can broadcast to 100 different locations today and hope that facilitates all interested members. All of us would have preferred the personal interaction that annual meetings normally offer and hope this type of virtual meeting is a one-time occurrence. Later in the meeting, we will reference on how questions and or comments can be sent for post-meeting follow-up. We share your emotions and appreciate the consideration you've extended so that we can conduct business today. Now we'll have the call for the official notice reading.
The official notice of the abbreviated Southeast Colorado Power annual meeting. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, notice is hereby given that the annual meeting of the members of Southeast Colorado Power Association will be held at 27850 Harris Road, La Junta, Colorado, Thursday, April 23rd, 2020, beginning at 12 noon. For the transaction of the following business: the election of board directors of the Cooperative, District 4, Western Baca, Eastern Los Angeles County, and District 5, Otero County, and District 7, Crowley County. Only the Board of Directors, Tellers, and Credentials Committee and relevant staff will attend in person. You may go to www.secpa.com for video and streaming options. The official notice of the Southeast Colorado Power Annual Meeting has been published in 9 newspapers throughout the service territory. I do possess proof of publications of these advertisements.
Okay, before we move to the determination of quorum, I have a statement to read. So again, due to the unique COVID-19 circumstances and for purposes of this annual meeting, voting on motions will be done by those members present in person. The entirety would include Garth Timmigan, Scott Larson, Penny Globacher, Chris Matthew, Jim Doak, and Board of Directors and CEO. All 13 are members in good standing and voting in that capacity only. As an unfortunate consequence of these circumstances, we are unable to accept or record any votes via our live stream. Now I will call on the Secretary to proceed with the reading of the determination of quorum.
Determination of quorum. Pursuant to Article 3, Section 4 of the bylaws, a quorum for a transaction of official business is, as stated in the notice of the meeting, shall be declared and established by a majority vote registered by a show of hands from the members actually present in person. If a quorum is not declared and established, the meeting will be considered adjourned, but can continue for informational purposes only. Therefore, I would entertain a motion to declare a quorum. I'll move.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Continue on, Lawrence, if you would, please.
All right, the minutes of the 2019 annual meeting, or 18 annual meeting, I'm sorry, for the 18 year end. A copy of the minutes of the annual meeting can be found in the 2019 annual report. I would be happy to read such minutes out loud and in their entirety, or would entertain a motion to dispense with the formal reading in order to continue with their other business at hand.
I would move we dispense with reading of the minutes.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. One of the primary purposes of conducting our meeting today is for the election of directors in District 4, 5, and 7. As such, it is necessary for me to appoint 3 members to a Credentials and Tellers Committee. For total transparency, the board supported the 2 competing candidates to select a committee member and the board president, myself, the final. The purpose of this committee is to provide a verifiable record of the election of directors to represent District 4, 5, and 7. Therefore, I am appointing the following 3 members to fulfill this democratic process: Garth Timmigan, Scott Larson, Penny Globacher. As members of the committee, do you agree to serve openly, fairly, and impartially in the resolving of all validity of members' signature on return envelopes, intent of markup of the ballot, the registration of members, the tabulation of ballots, and any challenges to the election and voting process? Please acknowledge by stating yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. At this time, I will close balloting and ask the committee to proceed with their duties. These These individuals, along with support staff and the 2 competing candidates, are visible on our live stream from another conference room. I ask the committee and staff to now begin their work. Candidates are allowed to observe the process. All of them will disappear from the live stream while we continue with our agenda, but will return once their work is complete and the results ready to announce. This process may take up to an hour or more. During that time, our CEO has a presentation to share with our membership, and if finished early, we will pause while waiting for the committee to finish their work. Thank you. Jack, if you would, please.
Okay, Kevin, thank you very much. We're going to wait 1 second as our Chief Technology Officer comes back in, and we will put the presentation onto the live stream, and then I will go through that presentation. So we will pause just for a moment as he comes back into the room. Okay, thank you, Kevin Brandon. It's my pleasure to present Cooperative Overview, as I've done for the past 4 years as both a member of Southeast Colorado Power Association and its general manager. From my perspective, having a lot of experience with my peers and co-ops around the state, Southeast Colorado Power is the best co-op, and I think you'll see through the presentation why I believe that. However, I am going to begin. Oops. Got the first technical difficulty here. Let me grab the keyboard.
Glitch.
I'll have to move over there. There are unique times, and with that, I did want to inform our membership of some of the actions that have been taken by our cooperative in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. You can see up here on the screen some of the actions that we have taken that would be consistent with actions of other companies or organizations that are still operating during this time. As you might imagine, the electric distribution service is considered a critical service, and therefore we had certain exemptions from the current stay-at-home order that is currently intended to expire at the end of this week. We phased that in from the beginning of this, prior to the stay-at-home order, to ultimately close all public access to our facilities. Face-to-face transactions are being primarily handled through mail slots. Members, if necessary, can make appointments and have on occasion, based on circumstances, to come in, even with, although we practice the social distancing in the transaction. Only one of our employees is currently working remotely. That individual has field responsibilities, so there's a split between the field and their residents. We are looking to, as quickly as possible, be back full staff here where we can accommodate that. This one is primarily for social distancing in our facility that we're looking to remedy here soon, and we'll be back to full staff very quickly. Employees have been provided the proper PPE or personal protection equipment. We are under a new order in Colorado, as you know, related to the wearing of surgical and non-surgical face masks. Some of those you may see in the camera right now that have been administered or distributed to employees and others. And all attempts are being made to practice social distancing, including our meeting today. It is essentially business as usual, as I've described here. We are maintaining the same operating hours. We have not reduced those or limited those, as some other businesses have voluntarily or been forced to do. We have new services being connected, and those necessarily, or those are necessitated to be voluntarily disconnected. We are complying with all of the executive orders in relations to late fees and involuntary disconnects. Outages, if any, will have the same response time. So in relation to our membership, you should see very little, or have seen very little difference, or be seeing very little difference in the services that we had provided prior to the onset of this pandemic. However, we are online 24/7, 365 through our application called Smart Hub. That can be found, as you can see at the bottom of the slide, at our website, www.secpa.com, where you can make bill payments, look at your account history, usage data, set up bank drafts, make other changes, or set up notifications on your account. It is a great system. It's very, very user-friendly. I use it on a regular basis just to ensure that it is fulfilling what we want it to fulfill, and I think if you're not on it, you would be very happy and pleasantly surprised on what it can do in terms of keeping you linked to us through your account or accounts. Posted on our website is a preliminary 2019 annual report. Generally, we have in the past published or printed an annual report that would be available for those who wished a hard copy at our annual meeting. A variety of factors that towards publishing this came into play due to the pandemic. The primary was that based on our scheduling of the annual meeting later in April than we did last year, or even later than previous years. It was our hope for the first time to have an annual report that had fully audited financials in it. So the past year's booklets all have had unaudited financial statements in them, and the determination was made to move towards shoring up all of the historical data to fully audited financials, as well as this current year or a current year going forward within that. Our auditors were close. Even we talked to them in hopes up to yesterday, late afternoon, that we might have those audited financials ready today. They weren't, and hence we have put the term preliminary on top of the annual report. It does have the currently unaudited financials in it, which is an apples to apples comparison to those you'll see in the historical range. And we expect by the end of this month or sooner to have the audited financials, all of it shored up, and this preliminary will become a final, and it will be changed on the website. And at that time, any member who wishes to have a hard copy of the previous year's annual report could request that, and we would be happy to send that out. So one of the aspects of COVID-19 that has affected us and the auditors, even though they have some extensions on the taxes, have found that working from home is not as easy as it is in an office setting. So we're excited to have, for the first time, an improved annual report that will have fully audited financial numbers. And those are, at the end of the day, our official financials that we report all the way up through all of our accounting and legal requirements. So with all of the precursors and the disclaimers of the uniqueness of this annual meeting and this report or reporting numbers, I'm going to go ahead and start in and discuss Southeast Colorado Power, the electric cooperative standalone going forward. And so in past annual meetings, if you've been at them, I like to put a little bit of levity at the beginning in relation to the type of business that we're in. And we're in the business of electricity. And some of them have been historical in nature, going back to the 1700s, 1800s. This one is much more current. And in a time where social media is probably at its peak based on the stay-at-home environment that we're currently living in right now, it's often easy to forget that all of that is backed up by electricity. The internet is backed up by electricity. So even when your phone is detached and it's not plugged to the wall at the time, it was electrons that were put into that phone that allows you to get to social media. So kind of the funny here, if we didn't have that, if electricity went out, this is what it would be, or maybe even in the past. But really, let's get to the nuts and bolts of our electric service and what we try to do. We have a mission at Southeast Colorado Power that's rooted in three facets, three components: safe, reliable, and affordable electric service. This, obviously, with the last part of that, affordable, is one of our main focuses all the time. Certainly, we want you to take for granted that the light switches come on and off, or go on and off, or any type of service that you use our electricity for. But we also want you to know that we are trying to provide the best value as a nonprofit 501c12 electric cooperative. No rate increase. This is the fourth consecutive year that we've had no rate increase. The fourth consecutive year relates directly to 2019. We are obviously now in 2020. And we are currently in our fifth consecutive year of no rate increase, which from our at least most distant records find that this could be either one of the longest or the longest that we've gone without a rate increase. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through some of the slides. But this is something that we're very proud of, and that's why we put it up here first in line as we start going into some more specifics. One thing that we are proud of, and I am, is that I have been to a number of other annual meetings, as sometimes electric cooperatives do. We go and visit other annual meetings, and we share best practices and ideas or otherwise. And what I can say is we're proud of being one of the most detailed in terms of what we present in terms of our operations and our financials. So no other annual meeting I've been to goes into the kind of detail that we have and we'll be going into today. So let's look at the last 10 years. If you read my March Colorado Country Life article, which I'm happy to publish in every month, I talked about the fact that we've come out of 2020, or into 2020, and it's kind of a nice round number when you think in terms of a decade, and a lot of people are talking in terms of a decade. So why not look at our cooperative in terms of a decade? Seems with a round number logical to do so. So I have put up here, because normally we look at kind of half of that, a 5-year timeline, but let's look at a 10-year timeline, and it gives you some real indications of the types of trending that we have over this time. So total meters. So this is not our membership. This is the members might have multiple meters, and they do. And so what you have here is the growth of our meters. And what I can say is, of the 22 electric cooperatives that are in the state of Colorado, I think most of them would love to see this trend, because frankly, most of them see a different trend, whether it's flat or declining. So there are a couple of cooperatives who've seen a more significant growth. A lot of them based on indeterminate load, oil and gas, when you go to the northern part of the state in particular. But by and large, this would be probably an envious type of curve, because it's been steady. And there's been steady growth. And there's even better news than when we look at this on the next couple of slides. Normally, what I would do, I mentioned the 10-year timeline. Normally what I do is I project it out the next year. So we have our annual meeting in the current year looking at the past year, but I've tried to project out. I did not do that this time because, frankly, 2020 has a big question mark on it right now in terms of economy or impacts on any business. So I didn't want to put anything out there that's with that level of uncertainty. So that's why it stops at 2019. If you want to look at our meter breakout here, we're fairly heavily, well, not heavily, we've got our majority of ours in residential. Which is going to be important that I'll mention in a couple of slides. So just over 7,800 of these meters are residential. Just over 1,500 of those are irrigation, and almost 1,200 are in the commercial class, whether it's small or large commercial. We do have some sale for resale here, which is our wholesale to one of the towns in southeast Colorado, and we do have some street lights, but that gives you at least the general numerical breakout of where these meters fall. So we go from a very nice, steady, upward sloping graph to one that looks like this. And this really is a snapshot of the electric business. So you get a steady growth of meters, but this is what's unpredictable. And there are a lot of things that factor into this unpredictability of over the last 10 years. Primarily economy, but more importantly, Mother Nature. So within the economy, we've had some industry-specific changes that have affected some of our loads. Oil, for example, has had some effect on this. Some large aggregate load that we had for gravel. We've had Mother Nature when there's been wet years. Had less irrigation, and then drier years more. So that's what gives you this kind of unpredictable graph. And this is, if anyone could capture a crystal ball on this, it would make all the electric companies much smoother and much happier. But this really is a snapshot of the kind of industry and business that we live in on a regular basis. Now, that said, we've had the growth of a few hundred meters over the course of a decade, unpredictable kilowatt-hour sales, which is always going to be inherent in this type of business. But what this graph shows is that of those meters, over that time, the average dollars per meter or revenue per meter has actually done extremely well. So this would be even more envious for a Colorado cooperative or a cooperative around the nation to say, well, a few hundred meters growth, but you look at, $7 million of annual revenue growth in that same period of time, which means that the meters that we have been growing during that 10-year period are bringing us in more revenue on a per meter basis. So that's current and those that have been added. If you were to draw a line at 2015 to 2019 up at the top, we've done that without a rate increase. So the revenues increase without us increasing rates because we are a revenue-driven nonprofit organization. So our financials are based on, as all nonprofits, of revenue requirements to cover your expenses. So the great news here is that we have increased the revenue, especially from 15 up, including you can see from 17 to 18 on a really nice vertical curve without any rate increase. That vertical curve you can attribute to gas, marijuana, hemp processing, a few other things, but you can see it balancing or peaking out there. This really says a lot about our cooperative and our territory. What I'd also like to mention is that one of the things that will also make other cooperatives envious if they saw this is that we're extremely balanced in terms of our revenue. So we weren't balanced in terms of the meter classification breakout that I gave you, but if we look at revenue, and that's the more important piece for an electric cooperative, we're extremely balanced. So if one's down, one could be up, you can try to make up some of that. So residential meters, about 38%. Irrigation 27%, and commercial 32%. So if you just kind of made it rough, we're about a third. That's excellent because if you go and look at the 10-year graphs of those cooperatives who've had the most growth over the last 10 years, I guarantee they're going to be heavily skewed or weighted in one of those categories, which makes them much more exposed. And those categories probably, as I mentioned, are going to be in oil and gas loads that are indeterminate, and if they fall, that brings the cooperative down. Here, we are extremely balanced, and that's something that is definitely to our advantage. So cost of service margin. So cost of service margin is also our operating margin. It comes from vernacular that comes out of the financial reporting we do. It's also known as EBITDA. But if you look at, this is again, we went from a gross revenue graph that was kind of steady and upward to another reflection of our type of industry or business. So again, from 2015 to 2019, there's been no rate increase. So you've seen some downward trend going on there. We've absorbed 3 cents per kilowatt hour on our power costs. Power costs are upwards of 60% of what we expend every year. And we've had more maintenance, and we've also absorbed inflation during the course of that time with no rate increase. Interestingly, if you go back to the 14 to 15 spike where it went up, that year had a rate increase. So it increased the revenue, so it's going to obviously help your margin there. If you look year over year from 18 to 19, since we're looking at 19's figures here, administrative in general was flat at 6%. Customer service sales category flat at 6%. Our interest was down slightly at 5%, and that was mainly due to a refinancing of our debt under the same terms outside of the Rural Utility Service loan program into the Cooperative Finance Corporation loan program, and saved us millions of dollars in terms of that specific debt. So interest rates, we saw some of that benefit in last year, see it go down. We'll see some more this year. Depreciation was up slightly by 1%, and that's because we added more assets, which I'll talk a little bit about later. What I do want to highlight here, since this is our operating margin, so when you look at a business, any business, whether it's nonprofit or not, you need to see if your operating margins are your revenue, general revenue minus your operating expenses, true operating expenses. Are you positive? We are. So standalone, you can say that we have a very healthy electric cooperative, financially speaking. And you'll see asset-wise or other, we have other ways to make that same claim. So as I mentioned or alluded to, and I'll emphasize again here, when we look at net income, which takes into account some other factors, this is Southeast Colorado Power Association standalone without SECOM, any subsidiary or otherwise. So this, as I've looked at here, what is in terms of the cooperative itself, where are we trending? So the same trend lines you'll see, there was a rate increase from 14 to 15, which gave you that spike up there. What changes is, as you kind of see some of this go down, is your patronage capital fluctuations in terms of what we received, and some other things that are below the line, whether it be amortization or things that are not directly related to the operation side of our business. When you get to the inside of the annual report and you get to the bottom net line net margins of Southeast, that will take into account, my graph doesn't, but that does take into account SECOM and investment in subsidiary businesses. I did want to point out that in terms of Southeast Colorado Power as an electric cooperative, SECOM does not have any impact on the cash, does not have any impact on the expenses in relation to the cost of service, or revenue, I should say, rather than cash, on the cost of service to reflect these financials here. So what does that equal? That is, there's no rate pressure that's being applied to Southeast by its subsidiary SECOM. There is some cash that flows between the two. In 2019, there were some management fees paid by SECOM to Southeast. There were structural leases that were paid. There was pole attached fees paid. There are some shared expenses between the two, like cleaning supplies, for example. And there's some shared fiber where both SECOM is using, and Southeast are using fiber, one for customers and one for, say, substation communications for our electric operations. Another aspect to analyze the health of your business is cash flow. So cash flow is very important. And so We do have the largest certificated territory in the state of Colorado. We have the lowest density, which means we have the fewest consumers per line mile to pay for that. We have the fourth most line miles energized of all the electric cooperatives in the state. And so that cash demands are ever present just because of those factors. They become even more pressured when you get power costs that go up. And power cost as an actual cost is one aspect of our power cost, but the other aspect of it is load factor. So when you have a lower load factor, your power costs are going to go up. And when irrigation is not running in a wetter year, our power costs inherently will go up on a per kilowatt hour basis because of the low load factor. So you see some of that integrated into this. Now, this V curve here is related to some loan proceeds that were taken out specifically, I'm told by our CFO, during that period prior to my time. But I did want to point out here that if you drew a line between 2009 and 2014, so that first 5 years of the decade, there were $18 million. And so I should caveat by saying cash flow here does include loan proceeds. Right? And so when you're in our business, and it's been the history of our business, is that if you can cash flow, you can, which has been difficult in many times, and then you take on loan proceeds to help cash flow both your operating expenditures and your capital expenditures. And that's been a historical flow of financing. But if you look at this decade as a whole, you've got 2009 to 2014, there were $18 million worth of loan proceeds taken out. During that same time, you had rate increases, and you also had a lot higher margins. If you take 2014 to 2019, half that amount of loan proceeds were taken out, only $9 million were taken out. There have been no rate increases, but there have been lower margins, closer to, you know, the balance of nonprofit or otherwise. So if you look at just the 19 portion that went down a little bit, we had some storms, some line of credits. We did not take any long-term debt out last year. We had some refi deferrals that allowed us to defer some principal payments. So that's why you see that come down slightly. We are cash flowing in general. We cash flow for a business like ours that sees as a summer peaking electric cooperative is going to see cash flow struggles at the earlier part. Then we build it up during the peak time and then bring it down. So we're constantly using our financial tools to do that. I will say that I do believe that we will see the potential of some long-term debt taken out in 2020, but at least it gives you a little bit of idea of how the two halves of this last decade played out in relation to debt, long-term debt that initiated in rate increases and margins. So total utility plant, what this says is, well, when we've had cash, we've invested it, and we've invested it in our system. And our system is the core. So we go back to the three components or main objectives or goals: electric co-op, safe, reliable, affordable. We've talked about the affordability here. This is a reflection of the first two, safe and reliable. You've got to have a system that is maintained and invested in order to make sure it continues to be safe, not just safe for our employees who are out there that are working on that, but also for the consumers, as we know, that have that are out there and buy our lines or our energized lines. So we've been investing in our utility plant, and you can see a significant growth here in the utility plant as it's gone up to now, exceeding almost $115 million. Some of this plant gets invested in, and I mentioned on the cash, is that we don't have insurance if we have a storm that comes through. We have to cash fund all the replacement of our physical plant when Mother Nature, whether it's storms or fires, have to come through. But beside that, we have been growing our utility plant because we have a huge plant, and if you don't continue to invest in it, then you will get behind it, and this is not a system that we can get behind because of its size and density and low density. So what have we invested in? This total utility plant, a lot of facilities. in terms of the distribution system itself. There are some facilities in here, office, warehouse, mechanic shop. We've invested in fleet, and we've invested in some equipment in the last few years that we didn't have before in relation to excavation that helps us be much more efficient and helps our crews be much safer in the way they handle some of their work in the field. Equity percentage. So there's been up and down a little. This is a tighter in terms of the range of this that we're showing here. But that big line up from 11 to 14, you could attribute to high net margins during that time. As I mentioned before, high net margins with rate increases and loans help to drive that up. But that equity level, you know, based on we talked about whether or not you're taking out loan proceeds or not, has been fairly stable, and we believe it will continue to be stable and healthy. So that was the last of the graphs that I had to present today. I always like to end at least the business side of this with just a couple of the main objectives for the current year that we're in. Reliability. Talked about that. The last slide, the second to the last slide there was total utility plant. We continue to make investments there. Cost optimization. We've been creating some operational efficiencies. We've been restructuring the debt. We're looking at margin targets in both cost optimization and financial strategies. Member relations. We have tried to improve our social media presence, which I believe we have significantly in 2019. And we had a great annual meeting plan this year that just got thwarted by with a great singer and entertainment. And our goal is to bring more membership out to our annual meetings, and we really thought we had the lineup this year to do that. We're just going to have to defer that till next year. But those are some of our main focuses. That's not all encompassing, but I just like to give some highlights of kind of what we're currently working on right now. So we try to be very involved in the community. And Pedal the Plains, which is sponsored by the Denver Post Foundation. It's an opportunity for individuals around the state to get on their bicycles and learn about more about rural America, especially agricultural and ranching type of communities. And so it's an invitation that's open to anyone in the state. And they pick different routes every year, and every few years we end up in that based on the nature of our territory. We end up in the Pedal the Plains program. So this was last year. You can see starting from Lamar there, and Holly, and around to Springfield and back to Lamar. And I'm up there standing next to a gentleman who's in his riding jersey. That's Kent Singer. He heads up our industry organization, Colorado Rural Electric Association, and he's a rider himself, and CREA is one of the sponsors, and because it was in our territory, we were one of the sponsors. And you can see several of us there, our executive assistant and one of our directors and our COO. Over to the left, we're out by our Lamar facility there with a couple of our linemen or one lineman and our current line superintendent. And Power is the representative of Tri-State Generation and Transmission, who is our power supplier. So we were excited to participate in that. It kicked off in Lamar. The governor was down here to kick off that race, and we also hosted some dinners or other events, and we were excited to do that, and we'll look forward to when it comes through again. For the second straight year, we volunteered to send some of our linemen. We had one the year before, and we had actually two this year. It's a competitive process, so it's decided by the Colorado Rural Electric Association who gets to go down on a volunteer service project in association with the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association to bring electricity for the first time to a portion of Guatemala. And you can see the backdrops there. Those are actual pictures, so it's always amazing to me how a photographer can use lighting or otherwise. It seems like it would be a backdrop that they're in front of, but they're actually on the poles right there in Guatemala with that backdrop, and I think they're amazing shots. Jared Bruna and Jay Snowy, both journeyman linemen with us, went down there and had the opportunity to go back to the roots. And I talked about this last year after we had done it for the first time at Southeast. These two gentlemen competed and got 2 of the slots. If we could have got 0, we could have got more of the 8 or 9 that went down there. They represented us extremely well. They certainly felt like the experience from a professional and personal standpoint was life-changing. And if you ever had a chance to speak with them, they can give you that testimonial in person. And it really took them back to the roots of electric cooperatives. And that's something that I talked to them about in advance and hoped that that would be what they felt. And they certainly did when they got back. That what they were doing down there was what was being done in the early mid-1930s to late 1930s when we were created, which was bringing power for the first time and a whole different quality of life to an area that didn't have it before, and in the division between haves and have-nots. And so they got the chance to do that. Now, there was a little bit of some political uprising that occurred. Their time down there got cut short by some days. Normally they have a lighting ceremony, so add a little excitement to it. They did not get to have the kind of formal lighting ceremony that they normally do. They did have one, but then they had to be taken back through some valleys, back roads, armed guard escorts to get them back to Guatemala City, and then they were able to fly home. So they got a little bit extra that others in past years hadn't. Didn't change at all their perspective of it, and probably made the stories better around a few beers with their colleagues. Last year, one of our directors suggested that we do some highlights of some of our employees. And so I've added some of those highlights. We would have had those employees here in person, and I'm in the phase of this now where we're going to see a lot of faces. And because we can't be together and see each other's faces, I'm going to go through a lot of faces here through the rest of the presentation. But I wanted to highlight our two newest and our 2 most tenured in both the companies. So with Southeast here, we're going to start here with Herman Medina, who started last year. He's one of our apprentice linemen in Springfield. You can see what some of his hobbies are here, working on old cars, sport clay shooting. We asked for a quote, and this was his quote: "Do a great thing, do a little wrong." Now, Herman unfortunately got the draw when we were doing some tower rescue training that I decided to join in on. He had to be my partner, and I got to lower him down. Now, Herman is a former Marine. He's proud of it. He's got some great stories, but I took a little longer than the average person does. I don't do it all the time, and so he had to wait in his strap a little bit, but he's still smiling about it. Great ads, and we're always proud to offer opportunities for former armed services personnel. And we have a number of them here in our organization. Roman Horn. So Roman had been working with the town of Springfield in their electric utilities department and wanted a career path and the training that we provide to our journeyman linemen, ultimately to get to journeyman linemen. And he came over, and we're excited he did, because he actually had quite a bit of responsibility prior to coming over, and now he's really focused on developing his trade as a lineman, and his hobbies are sport clay shooting as well. So maybe he and Herman go off together on the weekends. His quote: "Don't take life too seriously, you'll never make it out alive." And so we're happy to have Roman on. He's been a great addition to our team. So those are our 2 newest hires in Southeast Colorado Power in 2019. So let's go to some of our most tenured. So we have Dave Malott, hired back in 1991, warehouseman here in La Junta. Dave's always got a smile, always helpful, always got some great stories. He's been around, seen a lot of things, and over the years, he loves chasing grandkids, chauffeuring wife around, and said he's not too many years from retirement. We hope it's not too soon, because he's great when you go out to the warehouse. He knows where everything is, as a good warehouseman does. His favorite quote: "Treat people like you want to be treated, and your life will be great." So I don't think any of us would argue that point. Vicki Mize, hired 1981, so 10 years prior to Dave. So our most tenured employee here, plant accountant. She also does dispatching. Dispatching is an important piece of the safety side of our operations. So dispatching would be like any other dispatching, let's say for police officers. We want to know where they are, what they're doing, and we want them to check in, and because they're out there by themselves in remote areas. So Vicki has been a very long-standing, stable voice to our linemen over the radio, and they appreciate it. And I can tell you, she takes that portion of her job, all of her job, with pride and seriousness. But the dispatching piece in particular, she takes a lot of pride. She feels like it's her guys, and she's responsible, and they've got to go home safe, and she's there. We practice all kinds of safety procedures for Mayday or otherwise. If something were ever happen, we are well prepared, but Vicki's going to try to make sure that that never happens if she can. So quote, and she said, "I'm simple. Vicki's lived in the same house her whole life to this day." So talk about stability. Life is good, and who doesn't want to be able to say that? So that's going to conclude at least the Southeast Colorado Power Association portion of the presentation, and I'm going to go into SECOM. And so we'll leave it with Vicki there, and now we're going to get back to some graphs and numbers. I do want to specifically talk again because we do have slightly different approaches on this. Broadband or internet service is also considered a critical service. It's become even more critical under a stay-at-home order. So we have followed along the lines of Southeast to try to be consistent, closing our public access face-to-face through mail slots, the appointments. We have slightly more where this business lends itself to the ability to have a little bit more technological workforce that could work from home. And so we had up to about 15 to 20%, maybe at our peak, working from home, but that transition is beginning on Monday, and we expect to be back to full workforce here, which we can under the critical service exemption in the next week or so, maybe 2 weeks, but we'd like to get back as soon as possible. They have personal protection equipment and all attempts to be made towards social distancing. That includes our internal meetings or otherwise. So business as usual as well. I will say between Southeast and SECOM, of all the service orders we haven't had one single consumer cancel on us. Every single one of them has said, please come, continue to come, and we have come. And so our business as usual is actually on the SECOM side been greater because stay-at-home people want faster speed service because there's more people at home drawing on the internet, and so we've actually seen a spike during this time of those wanting to get our service. We have had a focus, we haven't advertised this, but we have had a focus on education. We work directly with the school superintendents and all the school districts that we have in our service territory to help identify teachers and students who may not have the kind of service they needed during this time when we're online schooling or stay at home, to see what we could do to help and assist in that area. And that's been our contribution so far. And so far that has worked extremely well. We're maintaining the same operating hours, still services being installed, same with late fees, disconnects, and outages, all of them the same. And we do have Smart Hub over at SECOM with the same functionality, except at a different location, www.secom.net. So now the precursors are out of the SECOM side and talking about our current landscape. Let's talk about SECOM, but first, have another little levity because I just mentioned, our focus and everything going to online schooling. So any missed assignments can be excused only with a note from your internet service provider, which is us. So we had to create a new form for this and decide who's going to sign it or otherwise and run it through. No, I'm joking, but as this is as a joke, but that's just really relevant to the kind of life we're living today, currently today. And I'm sure the dog-aided excuse of the day is now it's the internet ate, or I couldn't stream it or otherwise. So different generations, different excuses for the teachers. But let's look at SECOM as a whole. So SECOM total customers, you can see, has had a significant growth since 2015. So if I put a little circle up here, it'd be at 2015, and it would say that's when a designated approach to growth was determined and initiated. And it has produced some very positive results in terms of growing our total customer base. If you were to look at kind of half of 2015 up to 2018 and kind of drew a line in that section there, that growth was fueled by both our own efforts, which is organic growth, so what you can generate in terms of sales on your own. You're out there on the street with a sales force, so the customers are calling you. There's quite a bit of that in there, but there are also some acquisitions in there. We bought 3 competitors of ours during that period of time in the wireless space. And so there was some of that customer growth would be in terms of what we acquired as customers. However, I would draw from 2018 to 2019, that last section there that's got a nice lift up. And that is 100% organic growth. That's 100% on SECOM's efforts. There are no acquisition customers in there. That's just based on our own efforts. And what it says is that our efforts are certainly paying off, but consumers out there are buying SECOM in the marketplace. They see SECOM as a provider of choice, and they're buying our service. And that's because we built the company and reputation despite being in a very, very competitive business. We have very, very big dog competitors that we compete against, from incumbent telephone to incumbent cable providers who are also trying to provide the same type of service that we do out there. You got some smaller groups out there, but we have some really big dogs and big competition, and we're still growing this business, and customers are switching from other providers to us or picking us over other providers. So that's a positive reflection there. So we go to gross revenue. Obviously, more important than customers. What are these in the gross revenue? You can see, especially if you go the last year, 18 to 19, ARPU's up, so our average revenue per user. We believe these two would reflect that with that pure organic growth, we're seeing a lift in our revenue as a whole, and this is great. You go back to 2013 in the 6 million range, and we're up at the 12 million range, double that revenue during that 10-year period. So those are the great reflections of efforts made in the initiative. But operating margins here. So this, we talk about, your direct revenues to your direct expenses. If you drew a line at 15 to 18, you would have the acquisition piece of that. So that's where your reflection in the downward curve there. That comes with acquired personnel or just staffing as a whole, asset conversion, investment in your services to convert it. It takes several years, many years in some cases, to get the economies of scale, but you're not going to get it in a short period of time. We are starting to see that but in the 2019, the last part of that curve down there, at the first half of last year, we had a significant backbone system upgrade that was necessary for us to be as competitive as we are. So much like the electric cooperative, we have a long-term or longer term, not as long as the electric cooperative, but a longer-term viewpoint on this service, based on a balance of a mission to provide internet service to those who wouldn't otherwise, or to places where they wouldn't otherwise be provided, as well as a profit margin. And the board is very cognizant of those two and how those two have to, over time, balance themselves out here. And this shows some progress in that area, and there's more progress being made on a daily and monthly basis. Same will be for net income. I mean, you add other things like long-term debt in here, aid to construction, lines of credit, taxes, tax implications if there are. that will follow similar trend lines, just it pushes it down a little bit. I will say that in terms of net income, when you have depreciation, and you have, the other slide had it as well, depreciation has been a significant draw on SECPA because of the technology-based business it is. It's 3 times, if you compare the depreciation of as the company as a whole, 3 times the depreciation as a number on SECPA than it is on Southeast. So you're talking, 10, 11, 12% depreciation, and about 3 times in the 30 percentile for SECPA. That's a significant drawdown on your net income. It is a paper expense, so it's not a cash expense. It's a paper expense, but it's still an expense through accounting principles you have to book, and that's something that we have a target on right now to significantly try to address and improve. But the net income is far exceeded by the depreciation. So if you took only depreciation out, these net income lines would be well above the 0 mark there. Cash flow, we've talked about an important piece of business viability. This does include loan proceeds, but we didn't have any long-term debt that we took out last year. There was some line of credit that we used, as we talked about, as a operational financing tool. We did, if you take, this is a year snapshots, but if you took 2019, each month standalone, 8 out of those 12 months of last year, standalone months, did cash flow positive. The last 10 of the 12 months, as we speak today, have cash flow positive. So this is an area that we made probably the most significant improvement on over the years previous, when we were heavily into our acquisition mode. Is cash flow, and we're certainly benefiting from that right now. We have invoked some efficiencies in headcount, workflows, technology to help that. Cash flow is an ever-present, everyday drive of ours and goal. And I said, even without the loan, this includes loans, but if you take loans out, then we cash flowed very well, as best we had in previous years, last year. Total utility plant, well, cash is going to, just like it is over on the southeast side, it's going to the main core and heart of our system, and that's what gives us the service that consumers are buying. And we're investing in the technology for this, and that this is not an inexpensive business. This is an expensive business. The technology is not cheap, and it doesn't last very long. And that's what drives up our depreciation, where we're having to change out based on the nature of technology, anywhere from 3 to 5 years, most of our systems that are ultimately serving those customers who have bought SECPA service. So revenues we get, we are investing it back in the plant. This is what you want to see, because if you see it going the opposite direction, you have to start worrying about what's the long-term viability of the type of product or service you have in a business. This is showing that we are continuing to keep our business, the core parts of our business, the mechanical pieces, viable. Equity percentage. Well, with the net income pressures, depreciation, this is going to go down. I talked about the depreciation comparison between SECPA and Southeast. That's been the biggest pressure here. We still have a tremendous amount of assets. We've grown those assets, but even though you have a non-cash paper expense you have to take, you have to book it that way. There's acquisition from 2015 to 2019 acquisition debt in there over that 5-year period. But we do have a finance and restructuring plan or ideas that we believe will increase this. This has leveled out, at least for now, but we do think that we will increase this back up over time. Maybe not back to as high as where it started, but there is a cost of growing your business, and certainly when you're making acquisitions and you have some long-term debt financing to support that this you're going to see this kind of trend, but the trend goal is to certainly move it back up. There is always an optimum level of equity, and We have not yet determined what that is on either side, but something that we will over time at least present to the board for their consideration on what our long-term equity targets should and need to be. So net income growth, trying to get in front of that depreciation somehow, which is going to improve our margins, which is going to improve our equity. So they're the top focuses for us right now. Customer retention, I mentioned we're in a very, very competitive business. And so retaining our customers has to be not just selling customers, but retaining customers has to be an important driver for us. And it is. It's been more of a focus, I think, in the last 12 months than it ever has been. Networking, because we're growing so much. Now we've got to ensure that we're keeping the customers that we have happy. Network enhancements, as I mentioned, you have to invest in your business, or else if it starts on a down, starts slipping, it can be hard to catch up. Okay, so now we're going to highlight a couple of employees here, our two most recent, and then we'll go to the two most tenured. Jake Mayo, voice technician, so he does installations of our service, so he's going to be going home to home here. His hobbies, hired last year, hunting, fishing, anything outdoors. Quote, bad decisions generally make the best stories. So a couple weeks ago, I went out with Jake on an installation. I will say that it's always great to go out and see these things end to end, and learned a lot of things from Jake, and appreciated the time he took to let me carry his ladder or do other things, and even introduce myself as the apprentice at the household to Jake's apprentice that day. And he came over from a competitor and is very happy with us, and so we're glad that he's with the SECPA team. Heather Martinez came over from the banking industry, had been wanting to find a place she felt. She lives in La Junta, and so is Jake in the Valley here, and loves it here, and wanted to find a career path for herself, and she just couldn't be more excited or bring more, I think, just happiness around the office. She's always smiling and just saying how much she appreciates being here and loves being here. But she's a customer service rep, likes to bake and crochet. Her quote, she did say she's a big Dr. Seuss fan of her family. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. And I think she definitely lives that or exemplifies that. Julie Geis, Marketing Operations Coordinator, who's at Rocky Ford. Julie actually has been with us since 2000, but TCOM, after that, she started here with Southeast Colorado Power and worked over in the Member Services Department, and then she moved over to CCOM and has had a great time over there, and really she created this position and really helped create some of the social media sales and marketing that we have. She also supports our field staff on the operations side, loves volleyball, walking, running, family. Her quote, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself and your way of thinking, and she credited that to this Marcus Aurelius. Another one who always brings a smile every day to our office. And our most tenured here, John Saunders, Chief Business Development Officer. He's had multiple roles here at CCOM, and really is one of, you want to call the pillars or founding fathers of the business as it is. And he's probably in his most important role ever with CCOM in the business development side. That is working with a key component of our revenue stream, which is our wholesale customers, our ability to provide non-retail type services to sometimes our peers that need traffic and networking to other places and need our bandwidth to do that, as well as looking at grant opportunities for us, whether state or federal, which are an important piece to the build out of this kind of nationwide broadband. Hired back in 1999. Likes woodworking and hunting, and quote, he's going to go football for us here. Vince Lombardi, the namesake of the trophy of the Super Bowl. Leaders are made, they're not born, they're made by hard effort, which is the price all of us must pay to achieve any goal that is worthwhile. So John's doing a fantastic job in terms of, especially this year, there's been a focus on the wholesale side and the development side, and we knew that that was part of the future and the strategy of CCOM, not just retail. Retail is important, but this is a piece that he has the best expertise in and is going to, has already taken it to other levels. So let's look at the team as a whole. So every year or it's been our tradition, every year there's multiple all-employee meetings, but last year we started a tradition to take an all-employee picture. And you've got CCOM on the left and Southeast on the right. We're 110 total employees here, a fantastic team, it really is. And I'll say it's a fantastic team, whether or not we had a pandemic hit us. But I'll say it even more because they demonstrated it, and your teams demonstrate themselves in the times of challenge or crisis or otherwise. And this team has just absolutely made the whole transition into this, and as we're starting to transition out of it slowly, the most fluid and smooth it could possibly be. They're resilient. Not a single one of them just threw up their arms and said, no, I'm not going to do something. And we have benefited from that. And so I just want to give them a lot of kudos because that's the core. We talk a lot about finances, books, numbers, assets, utility plants, but that's what makes it happen right there. It's those individuals that make all of this go, and they do a great job day in and day out, and they all are believers in the mission, whether it's electric cooperative service or broadband internet. Okay, so now we're going to go to some more phases. We would normally announce our scholarship recipients at the annual meeting, and they could come up and get their certificate. And we won't have them this year, unfortunately. So we're just gonna highlight them anyway. So the board decided this year to actually give out 2 additional scholarships that we had in the past, or additional scholarships. And so you're going to see individuals here that are children of members of ours who we awarded $1,000 scholarships to. Cameron France from Rocky Ford. You see his parents there. And heading off to West Texas A&M, down Prairie, and free veterinary medicine. So got to be one smart boy. Lauren Brown, senior Eads High School. You see their parents there. Ames Community College, and got a major in business. Alex Higby, Lamar High School. Parents reflected there. Texas A&M, mechanical engineering. Always a need for engineers out there. Caitlin Roach, McClave High School, parents listed Fort Lewis College, staying in the state, psychology and education. Here's some great looking kids. Allison Wilson, Pritchett High School, see the parents reflected there, K-State, ag business. Hopefully she can bring that back into the state of Colorado and back into our territory. Casey Ellenberger, Eads High School, parents reflected there, another West Texas A&M in animal science. Vanessa Ellis, senior Springfield High School, parents listed there, Colorado Christian University, nursing, BSN or Bachelor of Science in Nursing. She is also, I will add, a Betcher Scholar winner. So she won a Betcher Foundation scholarship as well, in addition to our scholarship. So we wish her the best. Certainly nursing as a frontline employee is a profession that has been elevated through this pandemic around the United States. We also get scholarship money from our generation and transmission tri-states. Obviously, well, that one back there was Basin, and so this is a Basin scholarship as well, where we have Hayden Mayo out of La Junta. Basin gave us $1,000 to give to her, and she'll be going to the University of Wyoming and taking on an accounting major. So those are our scholarship recipients. There was one other scholarship recipient Dylan Rehnquist, who received a scholarship from us, but then won the Daniel Scholarship. And he very nicely declined our scholarship and then took the Daniels, and we wish him the best, but that was great. And in fact, Dylan came to one of our board meetings, and we were excited to see him, and so great kids around, and certainly the future of Southeast Colorado Power, we hope they'll come back in this area. Colorado Rural Electric Association, our statewide industry group, does sponsor a youth leadership camp every year, and each cooperative is allowed to send a number of, it's not a finite number, but a limited number, I should say, youth off to this youth leadership camp up at the Steamboat Springs area. So here are the Southeast representatives. Kaysa Kurtz from Rocky Ford High School. See her parents listed there. We have Cord Proctor, Swink High School, and his parents listed there. National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, the federal or national industry association, does have what they call a Washington, D.C. youth tour. It's similar, but it's in Washington, D.C., so it's somewhat of an American heritage tour, and we get to send youth to that as well. So we have here Molly Tate from Fowler High School, who was selected to do that, and we have Emily Byrne from Strava Online Academy, who were selected to go on that this year. Unfortunately, as you might imagine, those tours and camps will not be conducted. It's very unfortunate. To the extent that they can be held over to the next year, they will, and are still interested. But we're excited that those individuals were selected, and we hope for the best that they'll still get to have those experiences for themselves. So with that, I'm concluding my presentation for the day. But that said, normally one of my favorite parts is the Q&A session, as it even is with the all-employee meetings. And we don't have that ability in person today, which is very unfortunate, because I'd love to hear any questions, as well as the board would love to hear any questions that any member may have. So that being said, if you look at the bottom here, if you do have a question or comments, you can email at info@secpa.com. All those questions will be brought up to the board of directors at the next scheduled meeting on May 20th, and all of them, we will discuss them, and reply will come back to all of those questions. So please send us questions or comments or otherwise, and we'll be happy to respond to those. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks for this year's annual meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Now with that, I guess we'll just have intermission while we're waiting, so please stand by and the meeting will resume.
We're still counting.
Okay. We would resume our seats, please. Okay, we'll reconvene the annual meeting of Southeast Colorado Power Association. And with that, now to begin wrapping up our 2020 annual meeting, I will now call upon the chair of the Credentials and Tellers Committee to announce the director's elections results. Scott, if you would, please.
Okay, from District 4, there are a total of 958 ballots cast. We spoiled 25 of those. So that gives you a net vote of 933. Of that, from District 4, Randy Phillips received 843 votes. In District 5, Kevin Carney received 510 votes. Christopher Matthew, 405. So Kevin is the incumbent, wins District 5. District 7, Crowley County, Clint Anderson, the incumbent, 493 votes. James Doak, 405 votes. So the incumbent prevails there as well. That's the report of the Tellers Committee.
Okay. I would like to thank each of the committee members for their service and now formally excuse them. Thank you very much. And you can stay on for the rest of the meeting. Choose. Even though we have a limited membership present, I would like to call for any old or new business. Okay, seeing none. As mentioned by our CEO in his presentation, any members is welcome and encouraged to email questions and or comments, which will receive a reply. It is our plan to conduct next year's annual meeting in Springfield and hope to see a large turnout. Until then, on behalf of the Board of Directors, please stay safe and healthy. I would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting now is officially adjourned. Thank you.
Kim called. Yeah, I'm going back to the